According to a report on Al Jazeera about 16 minutes ago, officials from Iran have departed, heading for Oman, where they are going to meet in talks with the United States. We still don't know exactly who is in the American delegation, at least not all of it, but the issue is going to be on the table tomorrow to try and find out, is there a way to avoid war, or is this just a precursor to launching a new conflict? Now, yesterday, there was a very interesting and enlightening interview on Megyn Kelly's podcast with Vice President J.D. Vance, who was talking not just about Iran, but also the nexus between the issue with Iran by itself, with the Russia-Ukraine war, and President Trump's overall stamp on the world at large. Now, I thought this was very, very enlightening because it really reveals how the administration sees itself and also shows some real blind spots and some potential problems. Also, along with that, also yesterday, we continue to see people who are very influential in the Trump orbit are saying things that are in some ways just contradictory to President Trump, like they are really trying hard to push him in certain directions, and that has not lightened up. And we're going to show you one of those as well. We're going to start off, first of all, with Rebecca Heinrichs, who is a regular on Fox News and is about as neocon as you can get, and had never met a war she didn't like, it doesn't seem. And she's trying to really compel President Trump to go in a certain direction. It's interesting here. Pay attention to what she says, because one of the first things she's going to be talking about here in just a second is what happened with the energy ceasefire, the so-called energy ceasefire in Ukraine. That's where we're going to start off, and then she's going to twist it back around into the Iran war as well. But note here that she says that she's going to cite something that President Zelensky says, which is going to be in contradiction to something President Trump says. So if she's a big fan of Trump, I'm not sure why she's agreeing with somebody else. But first of all, here is what President Trump said about the issue of the ceasefire.
It was Sunday to Sunday, and it opened up, and he hit him hard last night. No, he agreed. He kept his word on that. It's a lot. 1 week is, we'll take anything because it's really, really cold over there. But it was on Sunday, and he went from Sunday to Sunday.
Are you disappointed he didn't go further or go
Yeah,
longer?
I would like to. I want him to end the war. I spoke to him. I want him to end the war.
So he says, yes, Putin is correct. There was a week-long ceasefire. He did what he said, so I'm good with that. I wish it would have gone further, but at least we had what he had, right? So that's President Trump. That's his position. Rebecca Heinrichs the next day said this.
The Russians are essentially weaponizing that cold by targeting their ability to heat themselves. It's deadly, Stuart. And so the Russians are doing this to increase the pain on Ukrainian civilians. They did not live up to their bargain with President Trump and did begin to fire on those on the infrastructure there, Stuart, within 4 days, according to President Zelensky. So to me, we were talking about Iran, Stuart, I think that we have an opening here. It's essentially a geopolitical layup. Iran supplies the Russians with all of those drones, with military equipment. If President Trump can right now exploit this geopolitical layup by doing a military strike against the Iran regime, it would degrade the Russians' ability to continue its military effort against Ukraine. And if President Trump then were to sign sanctions that Congress wants to impose on the Russians, you can really squeeze Russia. President Trump is trying to reestablish deterrence that was lost during the Biden years. We've got a major opening here, Stuart. It is my hope that President Trump will take it.
That is so. Rebecca Heinrichs is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, which is kind of a neocon outfit, but it sets itself up as an elite intellectual center in foreign policy. And for her to say anything related to Russia or Iran is a geopolitical layup, I mean, already, before I even listen to a word that follows after that, I'm already hugely suspect. And when I did hear the words that came afterwards, my fear was confirmed. She's talking about a political layup, and I have to just shake my head as I'm listening to her talk. I just can't hardly believe it, that this is somebody that passes for an intellectual that seems to know what they're doing on issues of war and peace. Her understanding is criminally low, if I can just be honest about it. And the fact that she says that anything is a geopolitical layup, And then the specific things she says, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And she is trying to impose her views on the president. She's trying to encourage others to think the same way so that he'll do what she wants. So first of all, she completely contradicts what he said. He said on that clip I showed you that in his view, Putin did what he said he would do and temporarily had a ceasefire in energy infrastructure. Volodymyr Zelensky doesn't accept that interpretation, so she went with Zelensky's and says, yeah, this is awful what the Russians are doing. The Russians are doing exactly what they've said they would do. They will talk. They will have negotiations. They will not stop the war until they have an agreement. They have been saying that until they are blue in the face. People in the West don't like it, so they choose to not hear it. And then they pretend to act surprised when Russia does exactly what they said they were going to do, which is to continue the war. We showed you a comment yesterday in the Russian press. Again, this stuff is out in the open for anyone to see. You can listen to President Putin himself. He said it at a meeting in China. Sergei Lavrov says it on routine occasions. Many Peskov, Ryabkov, all kinds of folks, and in the newspapers just a few days ago. They will continue fighting. They will continue waging their what they call a special military operation until either they get a diplomatic outcome that they are satisfied with or they win militarily. They said one way or the other they're going to get it, and they will not stop any kind of ceasefire until that point. They have been very clear and very consistent on exactly what they demand, and they've not shifted off of that. So for us to keep on acting like there's something strange about what happened right here, or that shock of all shocks, they're going after the energy system, which they've been doing on and off for probably about 2.5 years now, I think. Maybe a little bit longer than that. But definitely in the last 4 or 5 months, there has been an accelerated operation where they definitely have the intent to knock them out. Russia is very open about what they're trying to do. They want to end the war, and they want to deprive the Ukrainian ability to fund and actually provide power to its military industrial connections. And they are definitely trying to make things difficult for the civilian population as well. That's just how war is. That's why it's horrible. That's why it's ugly. That's why I'm so against it. And it should only be used when absolutely essential to provide for your own security if you're about to be attacked. And that's it, because this is the consequence it has. Once you unleash the dogs of war, it's kind of a trite saying, but there is so much truth into it. Men can become animals, and things that they might never do in peacetime, they don't give a second thought to in wartime. And now that's what you have. They're just knocking out all this electricity and making life just absolutely miserable for the civilian population in Ukraine. It's just a fact. That's what they're trying to do to try to compel the regime, the government in Ukraine to come to a negotiated settlement. And if they don't, then Russia says, that's fine. We'll just continue on with the offensive operation. So for her to try to say, hey, how about we go this idea and use this situation in both Russia and Iran together? Because she's saying, and she starts off with the Russia-Ukraine situation, and then she pivots over to the Iranian situation and says, hey, here's a great opportunity, a geopolitical layup, to use her phrase. How's about we go and attack Iran and to destroy them, and then because they are helping Russia with a lot of Shahed drones, that will put a big problem with the Russians. And then the other half of that layup, I guess it's a two-handed layup, the other half of that is that we will sanction Russia. Well, what a great idea that is. If only anyone had ever thought of that every day for the last 4 years. Sanctions have not worked. We have basically made Russia sanction-proof, not just over the last 4 years, but really going back to 2014 and all the things that happened when they annexed Crimea. We have taught Russia how to get by without our ability, without our economic issues. And of course, it was during the hyperbolic in February 2022. And now then they are virtually impervious to it. They can still hurt. There's still some things they don't like. But by and large, they can get by without it. And they have shown that they can do so. So for you to go back in there and try to say the same thing that a lot of the Europeans have been saying within the last 4 or 5 months, that they're going to try these new sanctions, none of them have worked. We got, I think, 20 rounds. I keep telling you this over and over. Europeans keep saying other stuff about, we're going to have the 17th round and then the 18th round and the 19th round. And they were looking at the 20th. And I kept saying over and over, None of the previous rounds were. Why does anyone think the next one will? And it hasn't. It has played out exactly the way I said. And yet, here is this intellectual giant suggesting this a layup to where we can destroy Iran and then sanction Russia, and bam, it's going to cause a problem. It's going to cause the collapse of the Russian side. And then let's look at the first half of that equation, though. Let's go and destroy Iran so that it will get their Shahed drone. Do you not realize that the majority of the Shahed drones are produced and manufactured inside Russia, and that they have multiple iterations that they have already gone in next generations already? I think at least 2 generations beyond what the Iranians originally gave them with their Shahed drones. I think the Shahed 136s. Now Russia is at least on phase 2 where they have jet engines in theirs, and they're produced in Russia. So if you hit Iran, you're not going to have any impact on these new versions that are going into Russia. They produced them there. So where is there a layup there to go in and destroy Iran? But then we have to even look at more fundamentally than that. Do you think that because we have, quote, this massive armada in the region and all this additional firepower that has been flown in, air defenses that have been flown in, that we can just do it? We can just blow them up, man. That's all you got to do is just push a button, give an order, and bam, Iran will be blown up. I mean, do you not understand anything about how combat power works? And are you totally oblivious? And I'm saying this to her because that was someone that was just out. But I could absolutely equally say this to Mike Pompeo, to General Jack Keane, to Senator Lindsey Graham, to ad infinitum, all of these advocates for war with Iran. I say the same thing because they're all singing from the same sheet of music. And that is that you can just, all this massive armada, Victoria Coates was one of the other one, Rebecca Grant, and all of these folks, they just keep singing from the same sheet of music. So I'm saying this to all of this whole chorus of people that are doing this. It's not anything I'm taking out personally on Rebecca Heinrichs, but all of them are suffering from the same delusions or ignorance, I don't know which it is, that we can just go and kill them, and that Iran won't be able to do anything in response. That Iran cannot make life incredibly difficult and kill many Israelis. You say you care about the Israeli people, but what you're advocating is likely, if Iran does what it says it's going to do, and I can't predict that. They may or they may not. I don't know what their calculations will be. Their claims that they're going to do it, but who knows? That may be just posturing. Maybe they will calculate if the moment comes that they don't want to do that because they think maybe that will protect them from having more retaliation. I can't predict it. But if they do what it seems likely that they will, and what they definitely have said they would do, and that is attack and kill targets and people in Israel, and attack Americans and kill Americans at bases throughout the region, then if your advocacy works, chorus, then you're going to get a lot of Israelis killed and a lot of Americans killed. And there won't be any layup that's involved here. So your first part of your layup with Iran, that's not going to work. Your second part of the layup with Russia, even less of a chance to work, and shows that you guys have such a little understanding of cause and effect and second and third order effects of things. It is embarrassing. And people will die. If President Trump listens to you, if you're able to sway him and he takes actions, first of all, in Iran, and secondly, in Russia, all it's going to do is make Russia less likely to have any kind of cooperation, less likely to end the war on any kind of negotiated terms that in any way, shape, or form are beneficial to the Kiev side. Not that there's much of that anyway, but you'll just give them all the incentive in the world to just keep going militarily. Lots more Ukrainians will die, lots more Israelis will die, and American uniformed service members will die if you get your way. Likelihood. We'll see how it works out. And we'll have to hope that the president doesn't go down that path. One of the possibilities that we can have that maybe President Trump won't go is if Vice President J.D. Vance, well, let me be careful about how I say this, if he can talk some sense into Trump, but that also implies that he's tracking on this as well. He said a few things on this Megyn Kelly podcast, specifically about Iran, but also around in general terms about the use of force in the Trump administration and in their mentality. And some things are helpful, some things not so much. Let's start off, first of all, seeing what he had to say about the situation with Iran.
Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. That is the stated policy goal of the President of the United States. It's so funny. Sometimes you have people who are saying, well, the president's too belligerent. And then sometimes you have people who say, well, the president, he's talking about diplomacy and he's talking about negotiating with the Iranians. We shouldn't negotiate. We should just bomb them. What the president's going to do is he's going to keep his options open. He's going to talk to everybody. He's going to try to accomplish what he can through non-military means. And if he feels like the military is the only option, then he's ultimately going to choose that option.
Okay, some good things, some problematic things, even with that one soundbite right there. First of all, he's like, okay, he's talking about just what I mentioned, Victoria Coates. You saw there with Rebecca Heinrichs, Mike Pompeo, certainly Jack Keane, all advocating don't diplomacy. Larry Kudlow, don't use diplomacy, just go and bomb them. So he says, oh, some people are saying that. And some people are saying, no, don't do that at all. So he's talking about some other voices in that mix as well. And he said he wants to go talk to people. Obviously, I advocate that. Do talk to the Iranians. So we're going to do that, God willing, tomorrow, as long as everything works out all right with that. But the question is, what are you going to talk about? And then the concerning part is the last part that he mentioned in that soundbite there, which was if President Trump doesn't get what he wants, then he'll use military force. Okay, this gets to something we talked about on a show earlier today about the constitutional order and the deterioration of that in the United States. Our government was formed by design to where the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, expressly did not have the authority to decide on his own when, where, and how we would go to war. That was reserved for the legislature, for the U.S. Congress. It was supposed to be hard. That's not a bug. That's a feature. It's designed that way so that we don't get some pernicious idea that one guy just decides, you know what? I don't like those guys. Let's go kill them. And whether through just foolish decisions or ignorance, like some of the stuff that all that chorus is trying to advocate, ignorant of the fact that Iran could strike back and could actually draw us into a big war that we may not be able to win at an acceptable cost and could get lots of people killed, even our friends and allies in the region, for nothing. That's one of the reasons it's supposed to be hard, so that the standard is supposed to be really high. So you have to convince a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle that there is an imperative and a strong, urgent need to use military power. Now, the group can still come to a bad decision and things can still go wrong. But that way that you have the buy-in of the United States people and the elected representatives across the board in the House and Senate, that they agree that, yes, we're all together willing to do this. And of course, anytime these decisions are made, you have the ability of the constituencies, whether at the state or the district level, to whether at the House or Senate level, to make their views known to the senators. So they know politically that if the people in their state or district are against something, they're not likely to want to vote for it, because if it goes south, then they're going to take heat at the next election. So that's one of the features that prevents people from taking unnecessary military risk and just using the military as an instrument of conquest. So that's what's supposed to happen. But you see there, it doesn't even enter his mind that it's there. It's not even something to work around. He just says President Trump will decide himself, the individual, not a process, not the government, not the whole of the constitutional requirements. None of that stuff is not even on the table. That is one of the bigger problems that we have in this whole situation here, is that we now have normalized ignoring the Constitution. I bring this up all the time, and you see it playing out in front of you in real time. It's not even on their agenda to even worry about. He just says it straight up. This is what President Trump will make his own decision, and nobody else, not the vice president, not the Secretary of Defense, not the cabinet, not Senate, not the House, nobody. He will be his own counselor, and everyone else will just watch and wait and see what happens. That is such a dangerous point. I hope and pray that we get past this one here. But if we don't, because this has become so normalized, it's inevitable there's going to be another one. And one of these days, folks, we are almost certainly going to get into a war we should never fight and may not be able to win at great cost, because we allowed the guardrails and the protections of our country to be obliterated. We'll see how that's going to work out. Now, another one of the possible positive sides, at least for this issue right here, is that J.D. Vance mentioned the fact that he had been to Iraq, and he's like, we've seen what happens when you do it wrong, and we've seen what happens when you have a quagmire, and we don't want to do that.
I went to Iraq in 2000, or I enlisted in 2003, I went to Iraq in 2005. I am very cognizant that the Middle East leads to quagmires. Trust me, so is the President of the United States, and we're hearing that. We know that's out there, but more importantly, we know the history, and the President he has no interest in repeating the history of Iraq. What he does want to make sure is that there's a totally separate issue, which is you don't let crazy people get nuclear weapons and then lead to a nuclear arms race.
We don't let crazy people get nuclear weapons. Do I need to say this out loud? I guess I have to. Why does anyone think that Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon? They have never, since I think 2003, if I'm not mistaken, that's the one time they had some low level of interest and then they mothballed it. And since that time, every administration's intelligence estimate has always said they have no nuclear program. They have no plans for one. They have a religious fatwa against it. And even as recently as March of last year, Tulsi Gabbard said that there's no evidence that they have one. They have the technical capacity that they could go down one. They could race to a bomb pretty quick, but that they had not made a decision to do so. So we are doing everything in our power to give them incentive and motivation to change that. But amazingly, they have not done it, at least as far as we know, at least in March of last year. Now, what has happened since the attack last June, and what has happened in between, because now I think all the inspectors are out now, so we're blind. We don't have any idea, so we don't know what's happened by then. But why were we even in that problem back then of this alleged nuclear weapons program? Because this administration in 2018 got out of the negotiations that had been painstakingly put into place, and we had at least a 10-year window on it, which would have expired in 2025, back in 2015, to put a significant curtailment on the Iranian regime so that they wouldn't have a nuclear weapon and that we would have inspectors on the ground to verify that. Very detailed inspections, cameras, monitoring devices, all kinds of things to make it extremely hard, maybe not outright impossible, but extremely hard for them to be able to do that. We had all the monitors that you could imagine, significant curtailments on the Iranian regime. We got out of that. So if we actually wanted to prevent them from having a nuclear weapon, we had it in our hand and we threw it in the trash instead. So no conversation about we have to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon can take place until you recognize that the administration that's saying that is the very one that got us out of the constraints we had on them already. That's a fact, folks. You can say that the Obama era JCPOA wasn't that great, that it had some holes in it, had some problems. Who's going to argue with that? It did have some shortcomings, but they were shortcomings. The longcomings were significant. And the constraints it put on Iran was substantial. It was huge. We should be so lucky to have that on there then. You don't need military power then. If the objective is actually to prevent them from having a nuclear weapon, we had every opportunity in the world. And when that 10-year period came up, there was every reason to think that we would roll that over into another 10-year period or something similar to it. And Iran would have had every incentive in the world to do that. See, many of the supporters of advocates of war against Iran say that, well, one of the problems with the JCPOA, if it would have come to an end in 2015 and then they'd have had the bomb. No, that's a lie. It's a lie. It's a known lie. What that would have happened was at the end of that time, they would have had every incentive for it to roll over. Because if we had done what we were supposed to do and had lived up to our end of the bargain, we gave them incentive to stay in the JCPOA. By having targeted sanctions relief and to have them be able to succeed means that they had an incentive to go on, because otherwise you would have, if they had violated it, you could have had snapback sanctions. We could have put more on sanctions, set of more incentives to get them to go to continue on. Had they thought about letting it lapse and just going out of it, they would have had no motivation, no interest in doing that at all. But we'll never know that because it'll remain hypothetical because we got out of it and never found out. And so now here we are trying to claim that we may now have to use military power to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon. All this just shows that there is not actually an interest in worrying about whether they have a nuclear weapon or not. There is every incentive to use that as an excuse to destroy the regime. I think the most likely scenario is that there is profound pressure on Trump from inside the administration, from the elite in the United States, and definitely from Israel to finally and, quote, once and for all, destroy the head of the octopus in Iran and just have regime destruction. I don't even think they want regime change. I think they actually want regime destruction, which will just generate chaos and keep Iran just a complete mess like Syria. So it's a lot of factions that are vying for power, etc. And then they want to keep them fighting each other so everybody stays insecure and the chaos. And so nobody can rise up and have a monolithic power or a strong power that could someday even hypothetically provide a challenge to Israel. That's, I think, what the most likely scenario is and what people are after this for. But that's what you need to understand about the JCPOA. Next thing he says here, this is one of the more interesting ones. It just kind of makes me go, oh, snap. He wants to say, and this kind of is a la George Bush back in the first George Bush after the Desert Storm when he said there's a new world order. J.D. Vance dusts it off and tries it again.
There's a massive shift happening now in terms of world alliances long term.
Well, there's definitely, I think, a new world order. I think the president has sought to it. There's a new world order in trade. There's a new world order in globalization and the way that we invest in our economy versus, foreign supply chains. There's a new world order, and that the president is willing to shake up some old alliance structures. I mean, NATO, I think, is much different because of the president's leadership than it was 10 years ago. It was sort of coasting. It was effectively a protectorate of the United States of America. Obviously, you saw what happened in Venezuela. So, yeah, the president is putting a stamp on world history, but fundamentally in an America First way.
Okay, well, you can certainly make the case that he's putting his stamp on world history. Don't think there's much doubt about that. But an America First one? Yeah, I'm not seeing that. Was it America First that he used military power in Nigeria? Was it America First that he used military power against the Houthis in the Red Sea? Was it America First that he was using military power against Iran last year? Was it America First that he was using military power to kill a bunch of people and take the head of state of Venezuela? The answer is no to all those. Would it be America First for him to use military power in Iran? Of course not. It's an Israeli first, because Israel is certainly is the one who wants all of that, at least especially in the Middle East there. It's the issue with the Nigeria that was more to a political base in the United States. The evangelical Christians who said that there was lots of Christians that were being killed in Nigeria, and wanted the president to do something. So he threw a few missiles out. And I saw a report just a few days ago that says there's actually some small number of American troops on the ground in Nigeria. I have no actually idea what they're doing, but I think it's just a sop to try to keep one of these political constituencies, on his side. And the issue with Maduro, of course, they claimed it was all about the drugs and all this kind of stuff, and that's why we were killing all these people in boats in the Caribbean Sea and in the Pacific Ocean, not far from there. That was obviously complete nonsense because, as far as I can understand, at least from the public statements, I think there's only been one of those attacks since they got Maduro. So it was obviously about getting Maduro, which Maduro was obviously about getting the oil. All of this happened without any congressional authorizations, therefore in direct violation of the Constitution, Articles 1 and 2. It's against international law. It's against American law. No concerns given. So, yeah, he's kind of putting his new imprimatur on that, and it's now a lawless situation to where it is an authoritarian figure in the person of Donald Trump, and because he has no more guardrails to worry about, and he can almost do anything that he wants. The only limitations so far are self-imposed of, well, what happens if I do this and they do something that hurts me back? I don't want to do that. So he's thus far limited himself to operations that didn't have any potential kickback. This one here with Iran is one of the bigger ones, because this time, as opposed to last time, there's a solid chance that they fight back this time and hit us in ways that we don't want to be hit. And that I suspect that's probably why Trump hasn't or ordered any operations so far, because he realizes, and I think that many people are telling him, there could be a retaliation this time that could hurt us back, and we might not be able to get out of this one. So if Vice President Vance is right there that they have talked about the whole Iraq situation, and you don't want to start something that's going to turn into a morass and just, anchors and keep you held down like we fought with the insurgency in Iraq for all those years when it was really bad. Hopefully that is a lesson they're trying to learn, and they recognize that the chances of that are real and significant with this Iranian situation, because it could go south in any number of ways. And there's nothing to gain for it, because now hopefully he understands this too. There's not enough combat power because there is no boots on the ground, unlike in Iraq in 2003, where we had hundreds of thousands of troops on the ground, tanks and planes and all that, large numbers of infantry and artillery troops, etc. And we physically conquered the territory in about a month, I think it was. Nothing like that is even in the cards here. And the idea that you're going to use a few missiles, I think some look and see what happened with Gaddafi in Libya, because after a lot of air power bombardment and a lot of people rising up on the ground, that is what eventually took Gaddafi out. So I think people are maybe saying maybe that's a good scenario. They'll try that one. This one's a lot more scary though, because we're vulnerable to unlike in Libya where we weren't vulnerable, we are vulnerable here because we have a lot of troops in the area, and they have a substantial missile power that the Libyans didn't have access to, and didn't have targets that Iran has access to. So hopefully he'll see that, and we'll make a process on that, and we'll make action, meaning he won't take military action. Let's hope that happens too. Last part I want to mention on there is he's talking about, shaking up of alliances. Listen, I have been outspoken in my argument that we should not have advanced NATO after the end of the Cold War. We should have brought it to an end, or at the very least left it where it was, because we didn't need to expand it. It just added lots of cost and lots of other problems that didn't benefit us any, and it just went from I think it was 16 at the time to 32 right now. So you doubled it, and all the headaches that go along without all the additional cost, and there's no need for it. So I think we should have changed it up a long time ago by bringing it to a glorious conclusion with celebrations and parades and all that, and lots of people feeling good, and a good security architecture left for the continent, not even just Europe, but the whole continent, where everybody could live in some kind of security and peace. We should have done it that way. But what we shouldn't have done is what we have done, which is move it ever closer to the Russian side against their express declarations that it would mean war if we did, which is what happened in 2021. It was made very explicitly clear to us. It was hinted at in 2007, again in 2008, and nearly every year after that. So, yeah, we needed to have changed some things up. We don't need to just keep doing this forever. There should be no reason why the United States of America, 80-something years after the end of World War II, should still be providing the frontline defense for NATO. At the very least, we should say, all right, we're going to take an over-the-shoulder view now. We're going to be your second-order effect, your second-order defense. You guys need to take your own national security. That's what's appropriate. That's historically the way it's always worked. That's the way it's supposed to work. So that does need to change. What we don't need is to just have NATO into perpetuity the way it's always been, at least since 1949, and forever. And it should never change. That's not appropriate. The United States should not be spending whatever it is, tens, hundreds of billions of dollars per year on the defense of a country, of a group of countries that are rich enough to provide for their own capabilities and their own national security. They should be doing that. If we want to have some sort of over-the-shoulder thing, I guess there's room to negotiate that. So there's some change. But the problem is you got to do it the right way. What you can't do is say, you know what? I like that piece of territory over there called Greenland. I'm just going to take it because I want it. I don't care who it belongs to. I don't care what ally of ours that has an Article 5 guarantee. Don't care anything about that. I'm going to take it because I want it, and then maybe push back a little bit. So that's still unresolved. It's still out there. But just methodically just mucking it up and not having a clear plan, nobody knows what you're actually thinking. That's not the way to put your imprint on the world stage. That's not a way to have your new world order going on, because that's more like a new world disorder. That's like a new world chaos. That's not any order about that. So it really matters what you do and how you do it. So I like some of the things that the vice president was talking about, but I'd love to see them in a more coherent, strategic, all tied together framework that genuinely is America first and prioritizes the needs of our people and what we can do and recognizes there are limits to power and recognizes that that's not a bad thing. It's just a realistic thing. And that we can have a good quality of life if we stay within those confines and we do things that make sense. We don't alienate our friends. We don't unnecessarily antagonize adversaries. We just try to live in cooperation with everybody and have good relations, win-win outcomes everywhere we can to guarantee our national security, to guarantee our economic stability, and to don't get into wars we don't need to. Other than that, I agree with everything the vice president said. So there is a path in there, and there is the thing that we can do if we just put some wisdom and some intelligence behind what we're doing. It's still not too late. We haven't gone to war with Iran yet, so there's still a chance to walk back from that. We still haven't completely ruptured everything with NATO and all that, and we're not haven't just continued to go blindly on forward. So there's a chance and room to do it the right way. I happen to hope that there's still an outcome for that's possible. There's definitely time for it. And I hope that sanity will find its way into the president's inner circle, and he will not listen to these war lusters and these people who have no plan, and who's people who are advocating things that almost certainly will backfire and harm America. That's what I hope happens here. Appreciate you guys very much, folks, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.